Hi, this is John Schlitter-Petra, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio with us today, they're here from Music Biz. It's their first time to attend the conference. And if you've been listening to some episodes, you know that we have quite a few guests coming in on the show that have been attending Music Biz this year. Alexis Schreiber and Brianna Schwartz are the co-founders of Schwartz and Schreiber, a music and entertainment-focused law firm based in Miami, Florida. Their mission at Schwartz and Schreiber is to approach their clients' legal needs from a new law perspective. Man, we're going to have a little conversation about what this quote-unquote new law perspective is, with a primary focus in the music, entertainment, technology, and new media sectors. They work with their clients to navigate important business decisions and minimize risk through the complex world of rapid industry evolvement. Now, that's interesting because we had a bit of that conversation before the show started, along with technological change. Unlike traditional law firms, their priority is to immerse themselves in their clients' worlds, becoming an integral part of their teams, and growing in collective success together. Experienced, knowledge, and with a reputation for the highest level of service, they strive to provide a fresh perspective and deliver first-class results in their clients' chosen realms. Alexis and Bree, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
I always ask this question. If you listen to the show, you'll know what to expect. If you haven't, that means you have to start listening to the show.
We have.
Okay, good. Let's start with you, Bree. Entertainment law. Have you always been a music lover? Were you in the music business? How did you wind up going down that path?
Yeah, so we always make this joke that everyone who ends up on the business side of the music industry was either, wanted to be in music or was such a, had so much passion for it, but wasn't talented enough to do it on the creative side. So that was kind of my story. I was, danced my whole life, played piano since I was super young, was, the little kid walking around with a big stack of CDs. That was like all I wanted for every birthday was, the newest CD that came out. And so through college, I kind of got involved in the music industry through nightlife. We had friends who were essentially starting the whole, bringing massive artists to colleges and normalizing that whole process, and asked me to be involved with helping, coordinate with the management teams and working with them on site. And so I did some of that and realized that I really wanted to work, in the industry and work a bit more closely with the artists, and found this phenomenal program at the University of Miami that was a joint degree with the Masters in Music Business and Entertainment, along with, obtaining your JD, which is where I met Alexis.
Oh, okay. So Alexis, how about you?
A little bit similar. I grew up in Texas and was a singer-songwriter from the beginning, and played acoustic guitar and really, really had a love and a passion for it. And I remember actually taking my first trip to Nashville right before college and going down Music Row and kind of listening, to all the live music on Broadway, and saying, wow, like if, these people are playing at bars, I have absolutely no shot, because there was so much talent and so many unbelievable people out there. So I kind of had to find a different way to use my talents to, bring some help into the music industry and kind of capitalize on where I felt that I was most needed and best, could give my skills. So I was good at school, I grew up with attorneys as parents, and entertainment law was really attractive in that sense for the same reason that Bree mentioned. Music law specifically allowed me to combine the passion of music with, the industry and learning the industry and making an impact in that way. So started out in music and ended up in music, but on the other side.
The music business, as we talked a little bit before the show started, has changed so dramatically in the last 15, 20 years. And please do not take this the wrong way. But you two are both so young. You're seeing different dynamics taking place now, especially with streaming. And now we have to contend with AI and what those ramifications mean. Do you see the music industry as a blessing or a curse these days from a legalistic standpoint? And I'll let either one of you answer that one.
Great question.
Yeah, I think that it depends on perspective. So as far as from the business side of things, I think it's a blessing in the sense that there's so much opportunity because there's so many new innovations from a technological perspective. The standard record label deal, like we were talking about, is no longer standard anymore. So there's many creative ways to look at the industry and how can we help this client from a strategic perspective that maybe isn't what it looked like 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so I think on that end of things, the creativity behind legal is really exciting, and the ability to kind of look at the client more holistically and what is their career, maybe not just in music, but from a brand perspective, from, what are they trying to really do? Because that, could go so many different ways. But on the flip side, we were also saying the industry has become quite complex, and there's a lot that needs to be kept up on from a knowledge perspective, which is where we like to come in and really help our clients understand, these are the things that you need to be aware of. This is how the industry is changing. This is how deals are slowly changing. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that regard.
Yeah, I think even as an artist, it's come such a long way in the sense that there's so many different ways to make it now, whereas before it was pretty, limited in that sense, where now it's kind of, you can be self-made, you can put your own stuff online and engage with your fans directly and have that direct connection with them, whereas before it was a little bit more difficult, especially if they were, geographic limitations. And if you were in one city without touring or having the means and ability to do that, you couldn't reach fans in other states or other countries. And now it seems to be so much more accessible in that sense. And so that's exciting from an artist perspective and an attorney perspective to helping them, reach these fans and use these platforms and capitalize in other ways than the traditional, label deal where they were kind of the machine behind everything.
I think one of the things, and I think this works in your two favor, is for so many years, it was a good old boys network. It's just what it was, especially here in Nashville. Yeah, you had the guy sitting behind the desk chomping on the cigars and, cutting the deals. And it didn't really leave room for new faces, both on the creative end and on the business end, unless you fit within those templates that had been created. That's all kind of gone away now, and it has made more room for women such as yourself to have a firm and be able to represent artists without supposedly that glass ceiling being in the way, which I absolutely love. At the same time, it seems to me that maybe you two aren't having to battle with those old rules of engagement that we had. It is a brand new world out there. And with that being said, in your bio that I read, you talk about a new law perspective. So let's go there.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And in the beginning, when we launched the firm, there was definitely, I would say, the good old boys days haven't completely gone away in the sense that, we're women and we're also young, like you mentioned, however you want to define young. But, people sometimes look at us and they're like, who are you? Like, like, where did you guys come from? And the thing is, we've been able to build our success through the quality of our work and the passion that we have for our clients. And so, like, because we're women and because we're young, we go almost the opposite way in the sense that we're extremely thorough, extremely meticulous, and that's really, really important for anyone in the industry. But it's interesting that for us specifically, we've had to kind of overextend in that realm to really prove ourselves. And now that we have, it's been, quite fruitful. As far as the new law perspective goes, it's really about the relationship with the client and the way that we have become a partner to the client as opposed to an attorney behind, a glass door in a high-rise building wearing a suit that feels really unrelatable. The ability to communicate with attorneys, back when might have been more difficult. And for us, it's like, how can we be a partner to your team? How can we really help you strategize and think through the next 6 months to the next year? How can we help build with you and, provide input from a strategic business perspective in addition to a legal perspective? And I don't know if you have something to add.
Yeah, exactly. It's rather than being reactive when there's a dispute or an issue. That's kind of the first time that you think about, I need a lawyer. We want to change that and be like, no, listen, like, it's best to engage the lawyer as the first member of your team so that from there you can build up and, take strategic steps, review your agreements and make sure everything's in line and makes sense together as a whole, and allow us to be a part of the team the same way, that managers are, and kind of have that same relationship to foster the growth of the business or the artist or whoever it may be from the get-go rather than just when there's a problem.
You almost answered my next question that I was going to ask. So I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
What comes first? We hear the old expression, don't worry about the horse, just load the cart. It's an old expression. It's what we used to use in the record business back in the beginning of time.
Makes sense.
Yeah. What comes first from your two perspectives? Is it the manager or is it the attorney? And is it an entertainment lawyer or is it a business attorney?
Right. Well, so definitely the question of a manager and an attorney, we always say the attorney should be the first member of the team for the reason I mentioned, not only helping strategically grow the team, but also because lawyers have what's called a fiduciary duty to clients, meaning they have a duty of loyalty and a duty of care. And it essentially means that a lawyer has to put the client's needs ahead of their own. And that's part of the job description, and there's ethical requirements behind it. And it's more established per se than the other team members who obviously, for the most part have the best interest or should have the best interest of the client. But for a lawyer, it's like the bottom line. That's how it must be. So for that reason, we always say that the lawyer should be the first member so that we can help you engage the manager and, go through those negotiations, make sure everything makes sense and grow the team from that perspective. And then from there, you kind of are set up and then have your foundation laid out. As far as a business attorney versus an entertainment attorney, they are not mutually exclusive. We act as both. And, there are certain complex corporate issues that we will outsource if it's not our capacity to handle, but we do handle both business and corporate entertainment law to support clients in that space.
And I think that that's where the spin on a new law perspective comes in is, so like we kind of took our backgrounds and combined them and really like practicing our passion is in music, but just understanding music industry contracts these days isn't enough as counsel, because when the client, comes to us, they have a brand, they might have endorsement deals on the table, they might have ancillary, activities that we need to understand how to operate as corporate or business attorneys as well to help them treat their entities or their careers as a business, a functioning business.
We're going to take a break, get a word in for a couple of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Bree and Alexis.
You're listening to the business side of music.
This is Mark Allen Barnett, singer, songwriter, creative coach, and mentor. Are you an artist or songwriter or a family member or friend of someone who is? Are you trying to find your way through the often confusing world of today's music business? I'm here to help. Over the past 40 years, I've written and recorded hit songs, have had more than my share of live performances, and have seen the ups and downs of the music industry and what Music City, also known as Nashville, has to offer. I'm here to share that information with you. The Mark Allen Barnett Songwriting Tours of Nashville are a one-day to multi-day private interactive workshops developed to help you discover your best approach to songwriting, performing in front of a live audience, along with the correct way to network within the music industry. Our workshops are based around what you need to know. While in Nashville, you get an insight from behind the scenes, learn about the history of Music City, separate fact from fiction, and give yourself or a loved one the time of your life. This workshop makes the perfect gift for someone you love who wants to get their foot in the door of the music business the right way. For more information, go to www.markallenbarnett.com or www.musicchoosesyou.com. Remember, you don't choose music. Music chooses you.
Are you a fan of 80s and 90s country? Then check out Throwback Country Music, the weekly nationwide show hosted by me, Britt Jones. I have exclusive interviews with legends and icons that include Grammy Award winners and Grand Ole Opry stars. You can listen to the show wherever you get your podcast or watch it on our YouTube channel or our Facebook page. For more info and access to these options, visit our website at throwbackcountrymusic.com. That's throwbackcountrymusic.com.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio with Alexis and Bree of Schwartz and Schreiber law firm out of Miami, Florida. Intellectual property, which has kind of always been there in the background, sort of a tertiary type thing, but it's really becoming more on the forefront of something that the artist needs to look at. Am I right?
Totally. I mean, we, as I was saying before, we kind of combined our past experience to create a new law perspective around, you know, the entertainment client. And really, what is the entertainment client? They have their brand, they have their music, they have their album artwork, whatever it is that they have, that's all intellectual property. So if you're not protecting that, we tell the client, you're creating things, that's wonderful, but you're not owning any of the creations that you're making. You're not owning your brand, and you know the future opportunities there will be quite limited in that regard. And we could, you know, go off into the many different types of IP if you're interested, but there's a lot that, you know, kind of falls under that umbrella.
I think one of the things that I've seen over the years, and once again, I'm an analog guy in a digital world, is I've seen a lot of the old 60s and 70s acts who have resurfaced without original members because somewhere somebody, not directly related to the band, was able to trademark the band's name and now is touring as, you know, the XYZ band. In fact, one of the things that's going on right now, and I won't mention the name of the band, but they were huge in the 70s. They finally got a cease and desist from two of the original members because they were promoting themselves as this world-famous band, but they didn't own the rights to the songs. And so the cease and desist was, hey, you guys, we can't fight you on the name, but stop playing our music. And of course, now all of a sudden you lose all the hits that this band had. So owning your intellectual property is one thing, but owning all of it is a bigger picture.
It's so important. We've seen situations where people come in and have absolute hit songs, like household name type songs where everyone knows them, and they haven't seen any money from them because somewhere down the line they had signed something that had given away the rights to them. And it's just the craziest thing because from the outside you would think like, oh, they're killing it. They've, you know, made so much money with this song. And it's like, nope, they actually didn't at all. And so it's definitely something that we really, really encourage, not just from protecting your songs, but also your name, exactly like you're mentioning with the trademark. It's so important.
Let's back up just a little bit then. Is there any kind of recourse for those artists to be able to go back and fix that damage, I guess maybe would be the right way to say that?
Yeah, so there's something called a Section 203 copyright termination. It's very limited in time. It's very specific, and I'm not going to quote the amount of years because off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure, but it's like between 30 and 35 years after the creation of the work. You can go during that time and claim the copyright back. But the thing is, the industry has caught on. So in a lot of these like label deals or singles deals, there's language that essentially says that you will not, attempt to enact a Section 203 copyright termination after X amount of years. And so if you attempt to cross that language out when, the artist is signing a single distribution deal or whatever it might be, they're always going to push back, because if not, these distributors and labels and whatnot would have a very difficult time selling their catalogs in the future, or capitalizing on all the investments that they made. So yeah, I mean, there's ways around it, but it's quite difficult, I would say.
It's going to depend on the agreement, and that's why we always say that the contracts are so important, and having them reviewed and understanding what's in them, because they can be huge, 60, 70-page contracts sometimes, and the fine print, as annoying as it is typically where those arguments lie. So going through them and saying like, okay, is there any way that we can interpret this language in a certain way to potentially make an argument for master ownership or something along those lines. It's definitely agreement dependent, situation dependent. But we do have people coming back and saying like, hey, is there any way that I can, regain some of my rights or do something better in the future?
And I think that that's where Alexis mentioned that we're really proactive in the way we advise. And that's really a lot of what we do. So like we, advise our clients that when you're releasing music, every single person who touched the song should have some sort of paperwork, whether it's songwriters and a split sheet agreement is signed, or it's producers and a producer agreement is signed, or featured artists, because we want to ensure that that artist owns their, all the rights. Sure, royalties can be paid out and credit can be given, but the copyright to the actual music needs to be owned, because we've had scenarios where, ESPN comes to the client and they have this phenomenal sync opportunity, and we, look back at our emails and the client never, went forward with actually papering the song and obtaining their rights. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, you can't secure this opportunity until we go back and clear at this point. And when you try to retroactively clear music, as I'm sure you know, it's quite of an uphill battle.
Yeah, it really is. And I think you brought up something too. And when we talk about paperwork and crossing the T's and dotting the I's, that producer that you hire to work on that album, or those session players. I had one client years ago who had gone into the studio with no paperwork whatsoever. Well, she agreed to pay the producer a certain percentage, and it was a handshake, and that stuck, and that was fine, although there was no contract. But what came up and bit this particular person in the butt was she had never had a work for hire agreement signed by the session players. Now, all of a sudden, I think it was the bass player or the guitar player of the session came in and said, I have part ownership of that, and you can't prove that I don't.
Right.
And that's part of this whole intellectual property, 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Yes. Yeah. The work for hires are definitely important, because that's so true. And it's always a handshake deal at the beginning. It's so common, because a lot of times you're in sessions either with your friends or with people who you don't want to put a contract in front of, and it's uncomfortable or whatever the situation may be. And that's so true, because that's once the song has success or you see anything from it, it's much easier for the people that were involved to say, hey, I have a piece of that, or like, oh no, we agreed on this. And if you have no email chains or paperwork or anything signed, it's really difficult to backtrack and renegotiate at that point when it's already seen success.
And we've been able to even further than just protecting IP, help provide value for our clients. We've had, producers who have been handed contracts on the flip side where they're being, undervalued in the advance that they're getting, or the publishing that they're getting, or the points, and the difference between negotiating one extra, percentage on the master side, not to get too technical, ends up being, the difference between tens of thousands of dollars on the back end. So it's it's super important to like not take these like, because people are releasing so much music these days that it seems like, oh my God, another set of paperwork for this one song. But you have to take it quite seriously, because that song could end up being, you know, a massive hit, and you're losing out on a huge opportunity on both ends.
Especially if a sync opportunity comes along, because that's really, please correct me if I'm wrong, that seems to be where the money is these days, is sync licensing.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah, we actually represent a few sync houses of one company called So Stereo that is, tech as combined with music. They're essentially pre-clearing and pre-approving music, building a catalog, and then, pitching licenses to large companies for advertising purposes and whatnot. There's a lot of opportunity for artists in that regard. And if you don't have your music cleared, you can't, these platforms aren't even going to look at you to put your music on their platform. So it is really, really important. And I think as like content becomes more relevant and, social media is existing and YouTube and all of those avenues, sync is just more and more and more prevalent, because there's, an insane amount of ads and television shows that are being produced. And so there's a lot of opportunity in the sync world.
You brought up something that, once again, my next question, is the world of YouTube, social media, is that a good platform for artists to put their music out there? I mean, is there a financial advantage, and do they lose any control in that aspect? Does that make sense?
It does. I think the answer is kind of split yes and no. I think it can be a great platform. You hear all the time about artists who were discovered on social media, and that's how, Justin Bieber, that's how he was discovered, I believe, was, YouTube. And so obviously it pays off. And sometimes like the short-term sacrifice of maybe, ownership or putting something out there that wasn't fully papered, something like that can be beneficial in the long run if somebody picks it up, or that's how it's discovered. So I think it's a cost benefit analysis, and that's something that we always preach to our clients too. It's not don't take risks or do things, it's take calculated risks and just think them through and kind of understand like, okay, by putting my song out there on social media or on YouTube before I do anything else, or a lot of people do it on SoundCloud too. It's just kind of like throwing it out there on SoundCloud and seeing what happens. It can be very strategic and it can be very beneficial, but you just have to know kind of the downsides of like, hey, listen, like there are certain things that should be done in the first place if you want to make sure you have ownership and everything like that.
And I think one of those, in fact, is make sure your music is copyrighted. That is probably the most overlooked and underappreciated piece of paper that creative content holder needs to have.
Yeah, a lot of people don't fully understand copyright in the sense that the moment you create something, technically you own that copyright. But how do you prove who created it and when? That's where the paperwork comes into play. And then even a step further, you're able to obtain statutory damages if someone infringes on your work, so long as you register with the United States Copyright Office within 3 months of publishing it. So if you do not register within 3 months, you're missing out on potential, financial remedies that you could have in the event of an infringement. So it is really important. And there's instances where, labels are registering copyrights for you and whatnot, but it really should be, the artist should take control of that and ensure that they're receiving, they're proactively obtaining copyright registrations.
Does it make sense for the record label to file the copyright on the artist's behalf, or should the artist step in a lot earlier? And that kind of gets back to the thing you said, Alexis, where there's kind of a certain amount of uncomfortableness, if that's a word, that, I don't know, I don't want to upset anybody. And I think the last thing an artist ever wants to do, at least in the beginning, is upset the record label.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny because in the contracts, it always says that they have the right to do it, but it never says that they have the obligation to do it. So I think that, the latter of what you said is true. I think the artist should go ahead and ensure that they're either doing it or have that their own legal team do it. And I think that's where like things have changed in general in the industry. I don't think labels are like necessarily as holistically involved in the artist career as they should be, which is why I think the artist still needs to develop their team and ensure that they're on top of a lot of this back end, admin side of things.
Well, it also comes from an antiquated place because it used to be that most of the time, if you're signing with a record label, they're owning at least part of your masters, if not fully. So in that sense, if they own it, then sure, it's on them to copyright it. Otherwise, it's for them to protect. But now it's changing where artists are able to negotiate either more ownership or full ownership and things like that. And in that sense, it's like, well, they may not, even if they have, some kind of language in the agreement, like Brie was saying, where they have the right to copyright it, they may not necessarily have the motivation to do so if they don't own the sound recordings. So in that sense, I think that it should be on the artist to make sure that they do it or ensure that it's being done for them in some capacity.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for a couple of our sponsors. And when we come back, I've got a million questions. I may have to have you two come back for another episode, but we're going to have some more conversation with Brie and Alexis.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Branding. What is it really? It goes by many names: marketing, licensing, and image. When in reality, it's 7 key branding formulas that all need to harmonize perfectly. Mess up just one formula and you have compromised the whole brand build. Dead Horse Branding facilitates all 7 formulas under one roof, building, promoting, and marketing all brands at all different stages of their level. We are a marketing team's dream, and we were built to service talent, artist managers, record labels, independent artists, iconic brands, legacy estates, and startups. Rooted in music and seated across other industries like fashion, various talent, hospitality, authors, interior designers, lifestyle brands, and corporate entities. The 7 branding formulas do not discriminate. 7 branding formulas, all in one swift movement. Sick of beating that dead horse? Come to Dead Horse. Please visit us at deadhorsebranding.com or send us an email to info@deadhorsebranding.com.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is a part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about independence coupled with committed benevolent interest, which means that they can represent your client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products. It's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact John Adams at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309 for more information.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here with Brie and Alexis, who are with Schwartz and Schreiber law firm out of Miami, Florida. And as I mentioned before we went on break, I got a gazillion questions I could ask you, but we're going to start winding things down. Of course, technology and new media, and I think artificial intelligence, AI, plays such a huge role in all of that. Do we even have a full understanding of what AI is and what the ramifications of it are and the benefits?
Yeah, we talk about this a lot because it seems like people not only within the industry, but people outside of the industry clump AI into like this one big category. Like it's almost like asking like, what do you think about music? And it's like, well, what about music? So AI, we like to break down from a legal perspective into 3 different buckets. And there's essentially, the first bucket is replicating voice. So that falls under name, image, and likeness, scenarios. And then the second is utilizing AI, to create beats and to create, the background melody and all of that. And then the third is utilizing AI to write lyrics. So there's different analysis that needs to be had in connection with all 3 of those uses. And I don't know where you want to go with this, but I'll let you ask the next question.
Yeah, no, I think it's just the Wild West right now, and everyone's trying to figure out an angle or how to use it and capitalize. And you hear about just apps that are coming out every day utilizing AI for XYZ, and it's just really becoming prevalent, and it's a huge conversation topic because I think artists are very well aware of it for many reasons, like Brie was saying, like whether it's because they're using it themselves to help their creation or to, on the creative side, or they're apprehensive about it and they're worried about it from the sense of somebody else infringing on their hard-earned brand and image and name and voice and all that. So I think it's definitely something that everyone's kind of on guard about, and it's a hot topic right now.
You said it. It's literally the wild, wild west at this point. Do we see government regulation coming into effect to try and control this or curtail it to a certain extent, to a certain sense? Or is this something that should be left alone and let it grow?
I think the important thing to understand that does apply like universally to AI as applied to music is the fact that as of right now, per, case law precedent, you cannot copyright something that does not have significant amount of human element to it. What significant means, that's, a bit gray, but that's really, really important to understand. And while things are kind of like in uncharted territory where there's no governance like fully around it yet, we really advise our clients to, if you are going to utilize AI, understand that the use needs to be as a tool and not, for creation purposes, because it goes back to the to the IP discussion, where you need to own your IP. If you're utilizing AI to create your IP, you're not going to own anything.
I look at AI as what we as a record industry dealt with 20 years ago or longer, when downloads first came into the world. And it took a while to really fully understand what those ramifications were.
Right.
So I go back to my question is this a blessing for, content creators who write music? But should there be a caveat that maybe, they need to protect themselves with some paperwork legally as they go down this new path? And maybe, legal paperwork will maybe expand?
I think absolutely, yeah. I think it's definitely potentially a blessing. We often compare this to sampling. When that first came about, all of a sudden it was kind of just like, whoa, how do we deal with this? There's a lot of different ways that it could have gone. And now all of a sudden it becomes commonplace and there's a process for it. And, there's a clearance process and all this where it was kind of addressed. And although it may take some time, I think AI will probably be similar in the sense that right now everyone's just kind of like, ooh, how do we handle, what's happening and all these different technological advances. But I think that eventually it'll become a little bit more mainstream, commonplace, and like it'll be addressed in agreements. There's definitely going to be language changes and things that we see expanding in contracts. We're already seeing it in label deals and things like that, where AI is specifically addressed in contracts and like how they're able to use certain things. And so I think it's definitely it's coming, and I do think it depends on how it's approached. I think it's one of those things that it's not really going anywhere. So we as a industry are going to have to figure out a way to deal with it. but it doesn't have to be necessarily as like horrible and scary as it's made out to be sometimes.
We're also seeing it where it's not being addressed, and that's where like our, proactive instincts come in. Like, for example, we're doing a few major label deals right now, and they have, this provision that we've never seen before that's essentially addressing, any and all uses will fall under the same royalty that's deemed like, as traditional uses. And so that's where we come in and we're like, well, if some new AI investment comes about with this label and they want to blanket license the use of our artist's voice or their, records or whatever, that needs to be renegotiated because we don't know what that use is going to look like and the significance of our artist in that, transaction. So we're adding in language that says if there's something to do with AI, some sort of new development, renegotiation needs to, occur. So it's interesting because we definitely, whether it sticks or not, it's important to kind of be forward thinking there to ensure that 10 years down the line, our artists aren't like, well, what happened here? We never thought about this.
It really is a brave new world, isn't it? People that are listening to the show want to get in contact with you two for services that obviously they're going to desperately need that maybe they haven't thought of. How do they go about doing that?
Yeah. So our firm name is not easy to spell, but the best way, you can follow us on social media on Instagram at Schwartz Schreiber, and that's SCHWARTZ SCHREIBER, and then email, which sounds really old school, but that's really the best way to set up a consultation or, get in contact with us a bit further. And that email would be info@schwartzschreiber.com.
And I'll include that in all the show notes so they can look
Awesome.
there. Here's a shout out to our loyal listeners. Without all of you, we wouldn't be one of the most listened to music industry interview podcasts, including achieving #1 status in many countries around the world, according to the big kahuna themselves, Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy our show, please check out our Facebook page at The Business Side of Music Podcast. Please, please, please do not forget to subscribe and definitely hit the like button. While you're at it, go to our page on YouTube and click on The Business Side of Music Podcast to subscribe. You can check out our video webcasts to get put on there by our hardest working member of our team, Mark Sabella. And you get to see me and such guests as Bree and Alexis in the studio with occasionally Buddy the Music Dog. We talked about him today, but he hasn't made his appearance yet. Last but not least, check us out and follow us on X, which used to be Twitter, at BIZ Music Podcast. That's Biz Music Podcast. Bree and Alexis, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you
so much.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound designed by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.